One of the good things of a Formnext exhibition is that you can have a look abroad and see what other countries are doing and how the technical development is going on there. And therefore we have our Formnext series Hot Markets. And we are today dealing with a country that is one of the leading nations, not only in additive manufacturing, but also in many other industries. Thanks to the combination of world-class academic research, entrepreneurial spirit, and significant public or private investment in research and development, additive manufacturing is booming there, not only ensuring a steady stream of new printers, but above all, innovation and new applications. Companies such as XJET and Stratasys are among the major players in their industry, and institutions such as the Startup Nation Central or LATLab promote the speed of innovation in the country and its startups. We are talking about Israel and want to address the question in our panel whether the title Israel, a hidden champion and a startup nation really still applies. I would like to welcome digitally 3 people who are active part of this industry in Israel and can give us a good overview and insights on their country. Please welcome with me Yariv Lotan, Head of Strategic Sector Development at Startup Nation Central, Agmon Porat, Director of Strategic Business Development at Hamlet Valves and Fittings, and co-founder and CEO of LATLab, the Industry 4.0 Innovation Lab. And last but not least, welcome, Dror Danai, Chief Business Officer at XJET. It's so good to see you again. Welcome here in this panel. Good to see you all healthy. Yariv, nice to have you with us. What is your role at Startup Nation Central? And please explain a little bit what you're doing there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me. Startup Nation Central is quite a unique organization. It deals with It's a private, non-government, non-profit organization that deals with promoting the Israeli ecosystem of innovation. We build bridges of innovation between the Israeli ecosystem and multinationals, leading multinationals, Global 1000 mostly, governments and leading NGO leaders that would like to engage and gain from engaging with the Israeli innovation ecosystem, those that are seeking world problems. My role within Startup Nation is to develop strategic sectors as we define it. Those are sectors that have huge market opportunity, and we believe that can make an impact, a significant strategic impact on the overall development of the Israel ecosystem. We originally started with digital health, moved to agri and food, and added Industry 4.0 as one of those sectors, because Israel does bring a lot of value and a lot of uniqueness there. I think that the work we do, we map all the companies in all the sectors in Israel, and we engage with as many as 60 to 80 delegations of multinationals and governments coming to Israel, now coming virtually, obviously. We try to build the ecosystem in a way where multinationals, the customer, the global customers, the investors, as well as other influencers, all come together. And one of the ways we do it, for example, is the reason why we have this, in a way, panel, at least from our side, is that all 3 of us panelists here, Dror and Agmon, are all part of the Industry 4 community, which is, I think, perhaps the largest I4 community in the world. And this community brings together everyone to have everyone gain from it, in Israel and outside. And I welcome you to join it. I want to thank, of course, Adam Zawel, who leads the community, Itamar Yona for Princess, and Amir Veresh, all of which were very active in representing and to leading to this panel. And again, thank you for having us here and as a partner in the event itself.
It's great to have you here. Agmon, with the LATLab, you are promoting innovation in Industry 4.0. What is the focus of your activities there, and how much are you involved in additive? Because you're not only investing in additive, but what is the share of in additive?
Exactly. So I'll explain a little bit that I'm from a company called Hamlet. Like you see from right here, okay, Hamlet. We're one of the largest metal processing companies here in Israel. We have hundreds of CNC machines and metal processing tools. And we are producing valves and fittings, like you can see in my picture, that go into the industrial use. In flow systems, 3D printing has advantages and the resistance for flow, and we can generate lighter materials and better flows. So as a company that has hundreds of CNC machines and we're dealing with drilling holes in a metal, we're looking at other options for 3D printing. And we actually partnered with Dror, with XJET, even though we started almost 2 years ago to evaluate printing some of the valves using XJET. We obviously worked also with Carpenter and with other 3D printings to evaluate different technologies. As a manufacturing company, obviously we have 3D printings for plastics and evaluate. Now, in terms of startups that we involved with, in Israel, there's a very vibrant community from software to manage the parts, from understanding if we can print them or not print them, or which materials they are, from sourcing out small parts, even if some of them are in 3D printing and some of them are with assemblies like Giga or others. And we actually talked with almost all the companies that are doing 3D here in Israel, of course, because we have the privilege of doing it. But this is our major focus.
So, and Lead Lab, I mean, you are investing then heavily. Are you investing also, or is it more like bringing them together?
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So I didn't mention, yes, this innovation lab, we got a grant from the Innovation Authority to operate a corporate venture capital. It's like an incubator. So even though we are a traditional metal processing company that is doing valves and fittings, we have an incubation unit where we can inject up to, it's $1 million shekels, it's like $300,000 into a company. Mm-hmm. We give them free office space, we give them free access to the manufacturing floor, and of course, obviously, access to the customers. This is our way of injecting innovation, both in our product and in our production. So startups, as I mentioned, they get the financing and support from us. So that's the engagement that we are doing with some of the startups. Obviously, XJET is not looking for finance from us. And as an innovation lab, we're working with Startup Nation Central and to find startups and startups like XJET and others that are even bigger. And basically, this is a tool to drive the innovation inside and pilot solutions.
Okay, great. Dror, I mean, we just mentioned startups. I wouldn't consider XJET anymore as a startup, whereas I found a homepage stating that this is the leading startup in Israel. I don't know how you see that. So you bring several years of experience in leading additive manufacturing companies with you. What are you doing at XJET today? And I found a state of you which I want to address to. What do you think of the endless discussion that 3D printing is about to replace mass production?
Thank you, Sven, and thank you for being here. I would rather be in Frankfurt today with you guys, but we'll try to make the best out of it today. XJET is in ceramic and metal additive manufacturing, and I'm a chief business officer running the departments of business development, sales and marketing, and trying to bring it to the hands of companies like Hamlet and many others in Israel and obviously around the world. And I thank you for this quote, and I will state something that may come to surprise to some of our viewers and listeners. I don't think that 3D printing is about to replace mass production. 3D printing has a merit of its own. 3D printing allows companies like Hamlet and other manufacturers to make parts and to make components that are impossible. So 3D printing is about complex geometries. 3D printing is about customization, short runs, maybe longer runs, or even mass customization. But when you think about mass production, started more than a century ago by Henry Ford and others at the beginning of the 20th century, they were looking of doing something that is all the same, easy, and extremely cheap. And over a century, these technologies were perfected. And my colleagues here can tell you a lot about perfection of mass production. Additive manufacturing brings this unique ability to make a series of one, maybe a series of 1,000, maybe tens of thousands. But when you come to millions, unless it's a very small part, there are very good, very inexpensive solutions that we shouldn't challenge, because if we challenge them, we lose the focus and the benefits of additive manufacturing. And this is at least my focus, and I believe this should be the industry's focus.
I really see some similarities with digital printing like 2 decades ago. I remember working with Heidelberger, and then when the technology digital printing came up, Heidelberger was looking for the opportunity to make like 10, 50, 100,000 pieces at once, and this was not what the technology was made for, so they failed, and others were so successful. So this is quite a comparison, I think, here. So Agmon, we have to address it briefly, we can't ignore it. How do you see the impact of the pandemic on current trends in manufacturing right now?
So obviously the pandemic, COVID-19 has influenced a lot of areas, from the transportation and logistics in the beginning, but then in providing support, technical support. If you take an example of 3D printer, I imagine it was difficult for XJET or others to provide support from a distance. And we saw an increase in companies that are doing knowledge preservations, saving knowledge, giving remote support, remote presence, either through augmented reality. We see companies like Temi or others are doing remote presence. It comes to be relevant with the 3D printing, obviously, when you don't have parts. And I know Dror can show some great examples, and we as a manufacturing company, and I see others as well, simply 3D printed the part that we would usually outsource somewhere else cheaper, but longer. We simply did it here and took the risk that it's a 3D part and start using it, and it's great. So we saw a push to local manufacturing of some of the items only for what you could not get outside. Remote presence, increase in automations and augmented reality, and preservation knowledge. That's what we saw here.
Great, thank you so much. Yariv, how can additive manufacturing help ensure the resilience of production? Because I think this is the most used buzzword we have right now. So how is AM helping in that topic?
Yes, I think it's a great question. I think that really, if there's something that this pandemic has brought to our attention, is the need to maintain resilience in our supply chain and in our operations, as well as the ability to do things remotely. And remotely is not only doing it from a distance, but also doing it without being close to the resources and the supply chains that we're used to. So I think that the pandemic, would move the additive manufacturing, which has been progressing nicely over the last decade, also in attention and usage by industry. It has moved it very fast forward in the sense that it's not only about price, and I totally agree with what Dror said before. It's no longer just about price, and it's no longer only about the complexity, which was very easily attributable to additive manufacturing. It's really about the ability to print what you need when you need it, and to be able to come with the solutions when you don't have. And what this pandemic has brought forward is the ability to people to rely on it. I think, at least from the manufacturers I've been talking to, different automotive manufacturers and electronics manufacturers and so on, the issues of machine health, the issues of supply chain that led to that is needed to supply the specific parts, the ability to rely on that, the ability to understand that you need to build some platform within your factories or even in your near vicinity, city, country, area, that allows you to print all the parts that you need to maintain resilience of your operations, continuity. That is something the pandemic has brought forward, and I think this ability to rely on additive manufacturing is going to promote the entire domain, the entire sector of additive manufacturing, very much so. And I see many of the Israeli companies, about 38 companies I looked yesterday in additive manufacturing in Israel, from the very large players like Stratasys and XJET, all the way to the very young companies. These would all enjoy that shift, that reliability, which, by the way, Zoom has brought to our lives, or digital was brought to our life and progressed into a new digital age in general. And I think that also we need to accommodate for the public markets that are open now, and there are far more IPOs, and the availability of capital through IPOs is also very supportive of companies that deal with the hardware side, like XJET and Stratasys. Of course, maybe a little bit less relevant to the software companies, but definitely very important for many of the additive manufacturing companies.
So we will see a growth of printing centers all over the world, Dror? Do you think that's something that is popping up everywhere, 3D printing center? Like you have the big ones in Israel?
Absolutely. I think the need, as Yariv elaborated, the need to, if you wish, distribute the data and print it in local locations will change the nature of production. Again, not mass production, but flexible production of complex components will happen locally, and that will allow flexibilities. And we have a case that during the pandemic, we had to solve a problem of a supplier that couldn't manufacture and needed a very small component to be replaced, and we could print it in ceramics and continue the production for them. So the ability to have, and it's not just XJET, actually, if you need the ability to print complex geometries, it's not enough to do it in metal, and it's not enough to do it in ceramic. You also may need to do it in polymers and ABS and other materials. So you need to have centers with ability around the world, at least around the big cities, that will allow the show go on. Even in a case of a pandemic like we have today, or even worse one, it will give companies the trust that production never stops, and there will always be a solution, a replacement, without instead putting endless amount of inventory all over the place, of variety of potential things that can go wrong. When something goes wrong, all you need is the file of the component that needs to be replaced, and if you have the suppliers to give you this component, they will be able to give it to you within a very short period of time without a problem.
Great. And to add to that, Dror, that it's the small manufacturing shops that are being built and small manufacturing capabilities that are being built, it's not the mass production that for every little stuff that is being produced hundreds of millions of times, it won't be used. But a lot of items are complete commercial product. Let's say the valves, that is going to be produced anywhere, thousands, maybe 100,000 items. And non-3D printing is simply, it's not an option. Only the 3D printing is an option, and it's a commercial product and so on. And it's going to be justified in terms of cost per unit compared to the traditional ones, and customers are going to pay for it. So I definitely see how we in the future, the 3D printing is, just like we have a CNC machines, it would be 3D printings for those specific products.
I agree. Absolutely. I think also that when we look at mass production, we always think of price, but there is one side of the price which comes from price benefits come from mass production, but another one is maybe I don't need to hold all this inventory of spare parts to replace certain items, or for my customers to need this or that part, and if I can rely or ensure they can rely on stable stable line and supply of these parts along the product cycle, and then I don't need to hold all these inventories, and that saves a lot of money as well.
Are there already, I mean, taking up this point, Yariv, are there already closed circular economies running in Israel? So we yesterday, in the Impact Award of AM Ventures, we had Molyworks awarded, and they have created a fully closed cycle where they take metal waste and transform it into powder and then reuse it in 3D printing. Are there activities going on in Israel on that topic? Because that would be now the time, right?
I think Dror would be in better position, or Agmon, than I would.
Okay.
I think that there isn't. I know there's a lot of 3D places like Impact Labs and others that have a variety of different machines inside. But the full cycle, you can always argue what's the full cycle, right? Because it's always from the design of the part to a real part. And there's a lot of companies around the software around it, and even components. But I don't think there's nothing that, from scratch to scratch.
Okay, good to know that. Dror, let's deal a little bit more with Israel, because this is the hot market Israel topic here today. Why do we see so much innovation here, especially in additive manufacturing? I mean, you are in the industry for years now, and you saw it beginning from the scratch. Why Israel? And I mean, I met so many startups, so I see the innovation, I can feel it. Why is it, especially in Israel, so intense?
Well, it's an excellent question. I think the Startup Nation book tried, in a small book of less than 200 pages, tried to cover all the different reasons for that, and I recommend reading that. But in a nutshell, in my personal perspective, challenge creates excellence, and Israel addressed in the past, and still today, two major challenges that we had to overcome. One is, historically, Israel did not have natural resources. So creating an innovative society where companies are built on ideas rather than on natural resources of space or energy resources and others was a very good idea. The other thing is that in Israel, the domestic market is very little, which means that every company or startup company looks at the global market. And we started a few years ago, we didn't even have completed everything about the technology, and we went to Formnext in Germany because we looked at the global market as our playground because we didn't have a choice. Many great countries with much greater population and much greater domestic market, sometimes innovative people it's easy and it's comfortable to look at the domestic market, but that limits the creativity, that limits the challenges. And I think that created an environment, especially in the last 20, 30 years, where in Israel you have a lot of innovation. Specifically in 3D, I would like to remind one of the guys of Cubital, Mr. Chaim Levy, that I think you all know, was one of the first in 3D printing. And actually one of the first two companies in 3D printing in the early 80s was created in Israel called Cubital. Maybe some of the viewers heard about it. And so that was from the early days, but that's not enough. In addition to that, and you mentioned Heidelberg earlier, the revolution of 2D digital printing started in Israel with a couple of companies in the late 70s or even before. Today they are part of American large corporation, but they started and created innovative 2D printing. This creates a mass amount of people with good training, good exposure to international market standards, international markets, marketing, and so on and so forth. So if you look at these two companies, today most of the divisions of these companies belong to HP and some other global corporates, but this gave a boost. And when 3D printing became important and more central, like myself, it was very natural to see people moving because of the technologies, because of the basis that they had built so strongly. It was a natural migration from 2D in the late 90s into 3D. Definitely the creation of XJET, today's Stratasys, created hundreds of individuals, and every single month I hear about another object baby, meaning people that were exposed to object, worked for object, or later on at Stratasys, and then they came with their own ideas and created another company that does metal or does ceramic or does something else or software. And this contributed, among many other reasons, to the central role of the Israelis in 3D printing.
I want to add to that, Dror. You mentioned the ceramic. There's also, of course, aluminum. There's electronics. There's bio 3D printing. There's a variety of different nanofabric or micro 3D printings, building 3D printing. There's a variety of different stuff that is being 3D printed here in Israel.
I think that another point that worth mentioning is that, you know, when you sum up everything, and there are over 7,000 startup companies in Israel, technology innovators. And when you look at Industry 4, you have approximately between 300 to 400, depending how you count and how you classify the companies that are doing industrial innovation. And that's despite Israel being a very small manufacturing country. So we don't have any advantages here, and still we are innovating. Again, if you drill down, it's because Industry 4 is about digital industry, and we're good at digital. We've been good when it comes to cyber, to communications, to fintech. We've been good in digital side of things for quite a few years now, actually quite a few decades. And I think all of that brings forward the opportunity to develop markets where we have advantages. And the Israeli ecosystem is very diverse. And if you look at it, I think you know, when you sum up the reason why Israel is perhaps very good in additive manufacturing is because it's a combination of luck, like Dror said. You know, there were companies started up here in printing and then in 3D printing, and that led to a lot of good things happening over years. There is character. Again, Dror mentioned the side of the Israeli ingenuity, the fact that we had to solve problems for our own, then for the world, and that's part of our DNA. And I think also, in addition to all of that, there is part that has to do with something we did develop here very nicely, and that is the ability to build ecosystem of innovation. And I think what Dror elaborated on the object babies is one facet of it. The fact that people work together, the fact that we have this panel is because of a few good people in the additive manufacturing in Israel, you know, making an effort to bring this forward and create more awareness. And I think that is the ability of people in Israel to come together for a mutual goal and promote it. And the ecosystem is very effective. It's effective formally in the community. It's effective because we talk to one another and we help out. And that has been, I think, a key driver to Israel maintaining its advantage over years and producing, you know, not only living with the very good old companies like XJET and Stratasys and others even before that, for example, Polycon, for example, but other, I think that there are so many young companies and companies in the areas of you know, materials for printing and hardware and software and companies that are doing things like food printing for plant-based and others, or printing like Agmon said, bioparts, like kidneys, coal plant. There are so many good companies that are doing innovation in that space and that understand the need from different aspects and keep extending the reach of this ecosystem in that space of additive manufacturing.
If I hear all three of you, it sounds so attractive. Is there like a pull from Israel to people who wants to get into that industry? I mean, I met a startup where one German colleague went to Israel in order to be part of that startup. So often when I see Israeli startups, there's a mixture of cultures and nations in the leading or on the founding board. So are there many people saying, I need to go to Israel if I want to get into the topic? Or let's add a question, Dror. If you say there was this transfer from 2D to 3D, and specifically in Israel very, very intensively, so was there a move from many people that say, oh, there's actually the action going on? Let's go to Israel and work there. Are you getting a lot of people from outside?
Not as much as you would imagine, but we do start to see things of that nature recently. I do get, surprisingly, today the world is very small. So everybody anywhere on the planet can find my name and send me an email within a couple of minutes. So I just got a request a couple of days ago from a lady in New Jersey, I believe, that they wanted to come here and work for XJET. So that was very nice. And that happens not on a daily basis, but that happens more and more recently. I still don't see a flow of people coming to the Holy Land for 3D printing. Hopefully, the COVID-19 will be soon maintained somehow, so people will come to the Holy Land to see the holy places. I don't trust that they will just come to see. I do see a huge amount of investment going into the direction of Israel in the last couple of years. With this, we do see that in the interest to invest in Israeli 3D companies from all over the world. And this is almost on a daily basis. We get requests from people from any part of the world, and this is very encouraging. And hopefully we will open the flow. We keep our doors open. So to the viewers from different countries, if somebody wants to come over, we are starting to grow again now, starting to see the end of the pandemic and the bright future. So if people are interested, you have my name. It's easy to find my email. Send me an email and we will consider it very positively.
And I will check Slido all the time in order to see if we have current applications already in place. So great to hear that. So I think one of the major topics that makes Israel so special is the education. Yeah. So you have really an excellent education. So how do you, Yariv or Agmon, how do you cooperate with education? How's the connection? And what is the stream of people coming to your industry? Are they well educated already, or what kind of people enter additive in Israel?
So, I want to express how we are working, and I see it also in other companies, and the government is also very much encouraging the move of knowledge from the academia into the industry, both on plastic packaging, computer, biology. They are always fixated how to make the academia drive their innovation into companies. So there is just another call for action now from the government on that subject. We are working as an innovation lab. We're working in projects with universities, projects with students for the student project. It's called, it's like 120 hours a year that they need to do it. We're doing it with design companies. We're doing it with Technion, it's like the Israel MIT. We're doing it with Tel Aviv University and FECA and others. In North Powder, it's like a more focused for industrial academia. And that's the way we implement some of the innovation out of it. And as Dror mentioned before, it's an ecosystem. So if there's one company that starts to do something and they're doing 3D printing because they adjusted to it, I think one of the things that characterizes as a people also is that we are very well adapting ourselves to the environment after 2,000 years. So we are doing it similarly also in technologies, and we can adapt one technology from one area directly into 3D printing or agriculture or whatever. If we think as an entrepreneur that there's money there and there's an opportunity there and somebody needs the solution, we are open-minded to change our solution into a new market. And then if there's one company that is doing it, it educated people of engineers, it engaged with the university, and the university already opens areas for it. Yariv and Dror mentioned it before, there's a variety of networks, unofficial networks in Israel for 3D printing, for manufacturing, and every day people upload questions there and helping one another, trying to educate themselves as well.
My question now refers again to the topic we discussed before of the people entering Israel. So if I imagine if you have such a good education and they see the people that they start their business life in such a vibrant startup culture with a high innovation level, then there might be a big interest from abroad to get these people and work with them.
I can tell you that we are definitely. We are working, let's say Singapore, for example, University of Singapore, they have 2 universities that they are flying students into Israel for a 6 months or 12 months program just to learn about it's innovation in general. It doesn't have to be the 3D printing, but it's, I know that the MIT has another program like that. I've been working with the Singapore program for almost 8 years. It's amazing. They're literally flying the students here with one goal, that when they come back to Singapore, they would start and open startups there. That's one example. So
cool. I think that when you look at it, there is, first of all, I think Industry 4 in general is not only revolutionizing industry, but also revolutionizing the talent that is being attracted to industry. I think the more digital there is, the more young people, very talented, very highly educated, are ready to come into industry and find their vocation there. So this is one end of it, and you can see different programs, especially, by the way, I think the new wave, the new direction for industrial engineering, I think Dror as well, is in Industry 4 in general. Additive manufacturing is part of it in this sense. And I see that I've started my additive manufacturing journey about a year ago when I bought my son a 3D printer. And ever since, we've been consumed with printing stuff and trying to create a lot of things. And I see that in his high school, it's actually middle school, but it's combined there. And it's amazing to see what some schools have been able to do, and the level of proficiency, high school kids have, and the accessibility in different places. There's a WeWork here that is focused on the printing and design and creating part, 3D or otherwise, and you see it in high schools. There are more and more resources that have been pulled together, and in getting more people excited and involved in this part of this facet of technology and adaptation. I expect that to continue to grow.
So that means on the other side, Dror, a question for you, is that giving Israel in the 3D printing sector a competitive advantage? Because yesterday at the executive panel, when we talked to Mr. Schleifenbaum from the University of Aachen, he mentioned that there is a strong interest, but it's still not enough, and not enough education for additive manufacturing, or not too specific. So if you have this excellent education in place and enough talents coming out of that, so first of all, do you have a war for talents in Israel? And second, is that a competitive advantage for you as an industry?
I think there is already an advantage, and I'm not sure that it's related specifically to additive manufacturing education, but as Yariv mentioned, manufacturing engineering, mechanical engineering, software engineering, electronic engineering, which are all very good. Also, Israel, which is maybe 1/3 of the size of Bavaria and maybe 2/3 of its population, you got all the universities, all the excellent universities, and there are a few, very near to each other, and a lot of people, as both Agmon and Yariv mentioned, many people have the connections. Now, with the success of Stratasys or earlier XJET, a lot of people with a lot of knowledge about the industry, and the knowledge is not just in technology. The knowledge is also about the need of the customers, the understanding of what is still missing in order to make the next step. I think that the fact that a lot of people, and Agmon mentioned variety of materials that are being printed by variety of companies in Israel, all of these companies enjoy the little ecosystem where they are already in the industry for many years. If you think about Cubital, we are talking about the early 1980s. If you're talking about XJET, we are talking about the late 1990s. But you're talking about accumulated experience and specific knowledge of market needs that has been changed, of course, but has been developed gradually over 20 or even 35 years here in a small community. So the size of the community on one hand, and the extensive, long experience in 3D printing, together with a very good engineering education available in this country, but not only, all of that together creates a community that I think we can say has some advantage. This advantage has to be continuously invested in order to keep this advantage. That will not last forever, but I think today, with the great long experience and past, we have a great vision into the future. Companies and organizations, non-profit like the Startup Nation Central, that keeps feeding this Industry 4.0 and additive manufacturing and other panels like this one, continues to draw the good people into the direction of additive manufacturing and 3D printing, and therefore, I think this advantage can be kept.
Great. Yariv, we need to talk a little bit more about additive manufacturing here. So what are the most important topics in Israel regarding additive manufacturing? Probably compared also to the rest of the world. So what are the hot subjects in Israel in additive?
So like I said, there are 38 companies active in that space in Israel today. And the variety is very big. So when I looked at it, you see companies that are doing software or platform-based solutions, companies like Castor, like Princess, these are the younger ones, Leolane, all of these enable more and more AI-based or not AI-based, the ability of companies to actually manage their inventory of parts that can be produced and help manufacturers or people who need those parts actually produce them in the best way, in the most effective way and efficient way for them. So this is one side of things. The other one is naturally the hardware space, where you have the large players like XJET and Stratasys, but you also have smaller players like Nanofabrica and Logix and others that are actually producing printers, larger, smaller, and so on. And this is another very important domain. I found and then there is the Coldplant and Print CB, which deals with materials for printing, unique materials. And I found most fascinating are more and more companies doing that in the food space, like savory, it's like redefined meat, printing actually the food we're going to eat. I'm trying to practice right now to eat more plant-based. So when it comes printed, I can actually be more prepared. But there are quite a few companies, all the way, by the way, to a company like Ripple that actually prints on the foam of the beer the pictures you need. So there are really endless uses for printing, for 3D printing in all its variety. It's just the imagination that takes us there. And I think we'll continue to see. And like I said before, I think that most of the space is based on large amounts of capital. It's a capital-intensive space, and I think that more IPOs and the availability of IPO and public markets to feed those kind of companies like XJET, like Princess, which is already public, is going to drive even that more. And you know, I think I saw that over 40% of Israel's, of those 38 companies I mentioned, are very young companies, companies, you know, 2 or 3 years old. And so they have a lot of traction to go forward and to create and carve their niche. And when you have in the same space and the same network of experts, people like Dror and coming from mature companies that have seen the problems, that have tackled the market, they know how to approach it. There are so many people coming out of those companies or consulting people like Dror and Agmon that can then come out and build their next company or the next innovation in that space because they see good examples and have good resources to be more successful later on.
Great. Agmon, you said you are supporting the startups with a certain amount of money. You give them free office space. Are you right now invested in additive manufacturing startups? And can you tell us a little bit about the background?
Sure. So the fast answer is not directly. No, we didn't invest directly now in a 3D metal or any additive manufacturing. I feel bad about it. One of the startups I did want to invest in went ahead and grew very fast. But we have been looking at it. So we've been working with a lot of startups, but not with an investment similar like with XJET. Most of the startups that come to us, the value that they get is not the $300,000. It's the fact that we are a real manufacturing company and we can do the product market fit, tell them exactly how we would use it and why, and it will help them modify their product and then connect them either to our customers, our providers, or we as a customer. So that's a lot of their interest as well. We are looking at 3D, both metal, plastic, and a little bit about the software, like a company called Giga that we worked with. But other than that, we didn't invest in them.
Okay. So, Dror, question to you. Where do you see the key trends in additive manufacturing, considering Israel in the next coming years? So what can we expect from Israel? What will be the hot topics for the next, let's say, 5 Formnext?
This is a point in time, Dror, to ask for an invitation right away, so you can give it a straight answer in 5 years.
Now, give me something to prepare for our next discussion next year. So, yeah.
I think it's a great question. I just forgot the crystal ball at home, so it would be hard to tell. I would love to say that we start to see, because we started to put ceramic systems around the world, in Israel, in Europe, in the US, and recently also we started in Asia. We are very surprised because we predicted that metal will be the focus, and once we started to put ceramic AM, we were very surprised at the large interest of companies from different industries. It seems that ceramic as a material has many advantages that we didn't know about, or we didn't pay attention to. Everybody thinks about wear resistance or temperature resistance, but very few people were telling us that the key about ceramic is that the acoustic is perfect, and tomorrow morning they will make thousands of earbuds, inner earbuds, not as a mass production, but in as a luxury good. So consumer goods are already printed on ceramic AM systems of XJET. That's a big surprise. And the more and more we read about it, just during the last few months, few market research was published, and they all tell about the potential, because everybody knows that ceramic has unique capabilities. Very few people, even in the ceramic world, know that it's possible to create now very complex geometries. So this is definitely one direction that I don't know if it will materialize, but we will be very happy if it does. And the indication that we get today from the automotive industry, electronics industry, and others shows us that this is a much larger potential than we anticipated. In addition to that, I think you will see unique niches that are being developed. Agmon mentioned some electronic printing, a very micro 3D printing, and other directions that I see some very, very good teams being created in Israel lately. It may take a little bit more than 4 or 5 years, but I think the seeds are put in the ground now, and maybe in 5 years, or maybe even less, you will start to see a new direction where the value of additive manufacturing will change these industries. And if I close the loop with my first answer, it will not change the mass production. So if you will need millions of the same copy, and this copy is not complex, I think there are good enough manufacturing technologies that a lot of people in the audience are familiar with. That will not change because of the availability of additive manufacturing. Only when you need flexibility of small runs during some crises in remote places, when you need very complex geometries, that's where additive manufacturing will come, give a solution, and change the way people look at manufacturing as a whole. Because there will be products, more and more products that today are not even being made that become possible. And this is my view into the future. AM will make, from Israel and from other great countries around the world, additive manufacturing will make the impossible possible, and that's what I see in the next 5 years.
That was a perfect transfer to my next question, Dror. You mentioned
if
first...
I can add, please.
Pardon?
If I can add something.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Yariv. You're welcome.
I think I'm not as experienced as Dror is, but I think I would put my money on software solutions, platform solutions, AI-based, that would make what we talked earlier, resilience and so on, make it more possible, more available, more easy to use, more mainstream. And I would also go back to what I said before about food. I think food printing is going to also grow in Israel specifically because we are also very good at plant-based solutions, and that the two coming together could be very relevant.
That's something I'm looking forward to be honest, because I've seen very exciting solutions already in printing vegetables, for example, where we have a lot of waste that is unused right now. So there's a lot of potential. But I would pick up the ceramics again, Dror. That's something you need to discuss with the MedTech colleagues, because we had a MedTech panel here at Formnext, and we discussed, not heavily, but we raised the question, when is ceramics are coming into MedTech? Because there's an urgent need in MedTech for ceramics. So I would go with your bet. So I would underline ceramics as a very important thing. Bringing us to MedTech, the recent news I've read about Israel, and that would lead to the question about regulations, etc. There are some fantastic results and use cases in MedTech. For example, they just printed the first heart out of biomaterial. Could you mention some use cases like this one that are happening in Israel, some success stories in 3D printing, one of you?
So I think the one I mentioned before is the one I'm more familiar with, a company called Colplant, who actually deals with printing kidneys. I think that's a very good.
Yeah.
I don't want to attest to the success or not. I haven't tried any of the kidneys, so I don't know how good it is. But obviously, even in that space, we see moves in the additive manufacturing to solve those problems with additive manufacturing.
But would you say that regulation in Israel is easier than in other countries? Also, if it comes to, I don't know, spare parts, anything 3D printed? Because regulation, honestly, was quite a topic over the last 1.5 days. So how's that handled in Israel? Because if you are a country that is highly innovative, then most of the time regulation is a little bit easier than in other countries to allow innovation.
Don't think we can bring any good vibes into this question, because I don't think in Israel we're very good when it comes to regulation. Hopefully, happily, we're a little bit more resting on other regulation in the world, but when it comes to ours, we're not as fast and progressive as we should be.
Okay. I'd like to add to that we have the regulations like, for medical approval and for saying that this product is safe to use and so on, even if it's not for medical. And we're way behind that. But on the other hand, just like in the US and also in China, we have test areas for autonomous cars in Jerusalem and specific programs because there is an innovation authority, also in different units like the economy and different units that are trying to speed up new innovations, not the general use, but to speed up ways to test autonomous cars or antiviruses or vaccines and so on.
Because this would be an argument on the other side for, I mean, I'm talking a lot to startups that's saying me it's so difficult here in Germany to get my product to the market due to regulation, etc. Probably it's a more innovation-friendly environment over there in Israel that would attract other startups probably to expand to your country or even to go to your country and start business there. Why not? Could be an option. Yeah.
I think what you see in Israeli companies, and I think that's one of the keys I mentioned earlier about the beauty or the advantage of the local industry, is that I look when I make a material safety data sheet for a new material, I look at the needs of the US markets and the European market. And I think that's the big difference. I mean, the domestic market is important, and we did some great things in the domestic market. The domestic market is it's a small market. And one of the things I like about the Israeli innovation is that people look at the challenge to meet the global needs rather than the domestic market. And specifically about healthcare or medtech, I think there is a wide range between printing a kidney, that will happen, but it may take another 5, 10, or maybe even longer, to creating tools to operate the kidney. And I think when it comes to regulations, there are different grades and there are different regulations when you make, like one of our customers, which I can't mention the name, it's a big manufacturing company of medicine. They integrated a ceramic piece that helped a jig, if you wish, already in the production line of medicine. So it's very, very far from putting a kidney in somebody's, it's less sexy maybe, but it's happening now. And I can tell you that dramatic changes to the production in the healthcare industry, which has many, many colors and levels and grades, will start, or actually starting already right now. So it's already moving.
Great.
I think that Dror touched on the issue touched it right in the head, in the sense that, you know, the advantage of having a disadvantage, meaning we have a very small market, is that everyone looks outside, and in different fields they choose different markets that make it more available for them to innovate there and to push forward their products. And so the Israel regulation is not as dramatic in key or an inhibitor to the innovation in Israel.
Great. So time is running out, and as I do it with all the other panels, I would give you the chance to express finally where the journey is heading for us. So probably you can give a few words on the current situation in terms of regards to additive manufacturing. So Agmon, how do you see the changes now through COVID in the next 1 or 2, 3 years? What are the determining factors if it comes to success of additive manufacturing, not only with focus to Israel?
I think Dror would be able to talk about it much better. I hope, I can tell you, I hope in what is that we would move from R&D and show more customers and move already to small first sales of complex parts. By the way, complex 3D geometries, an arc is a complex 3D geometry for metal processing. Even. So I hope this is where a lot of manufacturers would go. We know, for example, the dental 3D printing is used a lot in the dental here in Israel. So I hope to see it move to other areas and see more companies start selling electronics or use the additive manufacturing for plastic or other materials for their products as well. So
great.
We would definitely see more ecosystem, right? Software for managing it, understanding if the print is okay. There would be more, a lot of the engineers, they don't work today with the mindset of a 3D printing. So they're working for conventional design. So we would see a more shift into that area as well, I hope.
Great.
I think that,
are
we finished or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that I just completed, we completed a global research of Industry 4 and the challenges there. And when we looked at the general disruptive manufacturing method, additive manufacturing is definitely a leading part of it. You see that many of the global, the very large, 1 billion and above manufacturers worldwide are actually still prioritizing to a lesser extent, their interest in solving those issues. So I think that to look at the positive side, we will see a growth in the use of additive manufacturing to solve problems. I think COVID-19, like I said earlier, is going to be a great driver to push more and more solutions through additive manufacturing. Again, like Dror said, for the right uses. But I think the reliability and the comfortableness of people using it will grow, and I expect it to be very significant in the future.
Dror, you just have 1 sentence left, sorry. Want to add something?
From my personal experience in the beginning of the century with the SARS in Asia, we managed to bring a solution. At the time, it was with Adidas, and we managed to solve a major problem before it was created. We put object machines all over the manufacturing sites of Adidas in the Far East. So when the SARS, I think it was the SARS erupting in 2003 or so, they could communicate and they could send parts back and forth and design parts that if that was not in place, if we didn't do this great campaign with them in 2002, it would have never worked. So I wish everybody great health, and I'm not happy about the pandemic, but as additive manufacturing, I think will be one of the industries that will benefit most because it opens the minds and the hearts of people to the benefits and the possibilities that this industry gives in crisis cases. So I think we will see proliferation and blooming of this industry in the years to come.
Great. No, time has ended. Thank you so much. The three of you was a perfect discussion and perfect insights on your country. It was exciting to get a little bit more insight on Israel. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon in real life. Until then, please stay healthy. What a pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, guys.